Okay, y'all, I'm about to review this Final Destination movie. Y'all, this movie was insane. It was crazy. Okay, I've been watching this movie, this franchise, since I was 27 years old. Do understand, I'm 51 years old. So this is how much I followed this franchise, okay? I remember being 27 years old. What was that? 19, my God, no, 2000. Gosh, when was I 27? Oh my goodness. Was it 2000? Yes, 2000. I'm sorry. Yes, the year 2000. Okay. Okay, the millennial year, the Y2K. So that's when the first Final Destination movie came out. Some of you guys may remember that. So let's do the math. That was, my God, y'all, that was 25 years ago. That's right. So that tells you everything you need to know about this thing here, right? That's how long and how old this franchise is. Final Destination is now 25 years old. Rest in peace to Tony Todd, who you guys also remember was Candyman. Tony Todd has been in several of the installments of this franchise. He was in the original one. And you can tell in this one that Tony, he didn't look like he was quite well in this one. He looked a little gaunt, a little thinner, and to be perfectly honest, I think he kind of played to that. It was a very unique moment in this film, Final Destination Bloodlines, which is like the sixth installment of this franchise. But he looked a little gaunt, a little frail. And he was like, hey, I'm going to just enjoy my life because, hey, my time is basically up. And I just thought that was like, wow, I don't know if the writers wrote that specifically. It was almost like his goodbye song, his swan song to the fans. And I thought that part was very touching and very beautiful about Final Destination Bloodlines. And again, if you've been a fan of the franchise like me for 25 years, going back to the original one, back in 2000, was the actor Devin Sawa, who is like the main character in that one. I mean, my goodness, y'all, this thing really is just okay. And we all know about the Final Destination movies, whether you followed them as closely over the years as fans of the series like myself. We all have seen like the truck with the logs, on them. And then, it's just crazy, the kid who's cooking on the stove. And basically, Final Destination, I don't have to tell you guys about it. Most of you already know. The whole premise of it is that death is coming for everybody. And there's really a truth to that, right? And I think that the writers are brilliant and taking that reality and really kind of, exploiting it and hammering in on that fact and making it like, that in of itself is a horror. So, I mean, I just thought that was kind of brilliant, that the and y'all forgive the background noise. Just don't even pay it no mind. But I thought that was brilliant that the writers, and again, I'm not sure who the writers are, the original writers or anything like that, but I could tell you just taking that premise alone and saying, hey, this is horror right here. You know what I'm saying? And that would be the premise, this unseen thing, that is coming to get everybody. And that's really the premise of the story itself. Miss Luden, you guys remember that one from the first one. So at the end of the day, let's fast forward. So if you haven't watched any of the installments, or if you remember bits and pieces, there was the one, the roller coaster, that was one. I mean, it just showed you all kind of wild stuff. It reminds you of that show that used to come on. It was called 1000 Ways to Die. And I always felt like that show kind of was like, a springboard or really a spin-off to the Final Destination movies, right? Because the Final Destination movie, I believe, was out before that series. And I don't even think that series is around anymore. But Anywho, I'm sure you guys can probably Google it and find it somewhere out there in the, universe, metaverse, zeitgeist, whatever you guys want to call it. It's out there. You can find that, 1,000 Ways to Die. And it just, and that was actually real stories of real people who just died in the most, lost their life in the most unusual fashion. And it just showed you how frail and fragile life really can be. And so, anyway, getting back to the movie here. So that's just to give some of you guys a premise of Final Destination, the overall franchise of this movie, premise and the whole nine of that, as well as, the different layers to this. So, and I would say this, sometimes you have to see all of the movies to kind of understand like the latest installment. But the one thing I'll tell you guys about Final Destination Bloodlines, if you've never saw the original one, going back to 2000 and where the kids are all boarding the plane to France, and then it comes back in the second installment. Then there was one where the woman was pregnant and, and she was at the hospital and the girl had to save her. I mean, whether you saw any of that, the guy on the elevator, whether you saw any of that stuff, you didn't have to see it in order to get the premise of this one. So if you never saw any of the Final Destination movies or installments, you could absolutely watch this movie and get the whole gist of it. But people who did see all of the installments, or even some of them, there's certain little homage that you find that's, in little details, as I say, little Easter eggs that you find throughout the film, that if you've been a fan of the series, of the franchise, you'll know what that is. Again, just like the great Tony Todd. And the movie ends in memory of him. I thought that was beautiful. They gave a in memorial to him at the end of the movie. So that was really a nice tip of the hat to Tony on the film as the movie goes off. Anyway, let's get down to it. So there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this. So spoiler alert, if you guys have not seen this movie and you want to see it and you really care about not getting any of the 411 details that may blow it for you, just turn this off right now. Just don't even listen no more further to this, because I'm going to tell y'all right now, this is going to be giving you all the real skinny on what happened in this movie. So what I love about this movie, I'm going to tell you guys what I love about the movie, and I'm going to tell you guys what I didn't like about the movie. So what I love about the movie, oddly enough, it was more storytelling to this one. Whereas I always felt with the other Final Destination movies, yes, there's storytelling, but it's mostly like, hey, action, 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 crazy accidents, crazy stuff happening, taking people out in just these weird, wild, wacky ways. But this time, watching Bloodlines, Final Destination Bloodlines, this one really told a story. And I mean, it was surprising, because I'm like, oh, they're really doing some storytelling. And it wasn't just like, boom, it's in your face, like, oh man, someone blew up and lost their eye, and the eye just boom, splatters in the screen. It wasn't that. It starts out very calm, very, and I'm gonna use this term for a reason, very demure. And it also starts out like in a period piece, which is why it's called Bloodlines. And it starts out where there's this young lady, and, it's like back in the 60s. And you can tell, like, the way that the characters are dressed. And, there's a thematic song in here by the Isley Brothers. You make me want to shout, kick my heels up and shout, throw my hands back and shout. The shout song is in there. So the scene that song is being performed, it's like, it's such a tripped out scene. But anyway, it's a throwback. It's a throwback to the 1960s. So the movie opens up with that. And that's kind of shocking, because you go, wow, Final Destination is opening up like a period piece, which I thought that was a nice touch, very nice touch. Because that was the first thing I was asking myself, like, why is it like, giving me a throwback to the 1960s? But it does. So it opens up that way. It opens up where there's this, fancy restaurant, which for even at that time would be considered like something that was so, Art Deco, state of the art kind of architecture and things like that. And that's really kind of the premise. And there's this young lady, and, she and her boyfriend, he's like, hey, everyone wants to go to this thing, I think it's called the Star View. Everybody wants to go to the Star View, this very high end, high tech for that time, right? Architect, Art Deco, state of the art kind of architectural design, and, very, very cutting edge for that time period. So the movie itself even is like, hey, we're showing you something that, even for that time was something that was very, out of the box kind of thinking in terms of, this restaurant that has this, futuristic design. So basically that's the essence of this place where they're going. And I don't want to, linger too long on that. But the reason why I want to take a little time and explain that, because this is the thing that you go, wow, okay, if you see a restaurant like this now, you go, wow, this is very high tech, before its time, very cutting edge. So it takes that premise where there's this couple in the 1960s, young couple, they're unwed. And as you're following along, you're thinking like, okay, great, and you see that the young lady, she's kind of in her own world. Seems to be she's connected to the moment, but she's also very much disconnected to the moment. And her boyfriend is, doing all he can to kind of say, hey, aren't you happy? We're at this place. And then they have a little trouble getting into the place with some reservation issues and things like that. And where they basically have to say, let's just blend in with the people and let's go to the bar. Let's just act like, that we belong here. So there's that aspect of it. But once they kind of blend in and, the maitre d' is sidetracked by whatever else is happening. I don't want to give the exact blow for blow, but this is kind of the layout of, as I say, the lay of the land. The young lady, you say, why is this lady, you could tell that she has like this foreboding about her, this trepidation. And she's just looking at everything, and everything is looking like, oh my God, what's going to happen to that? Now, because we know that this is Final Destination, we already know, if you're a fan of the series, you already know that this lady is bugging out. This young lady is bugging out because she knows, and that she knows that, okay, what's to come? Something's about to jump off crazy, which is why I thought this was such a brilliant premise, because a person who has never seen any of the installments, a part of this 6 series franchise, you would, let's just say you never saw any of the Final Destination movies. This thing, it would totally throw you for a loop, because you would be asking yourself, like, what is going on? Why is this young lady kind of, have this, she's flipping out. She's kind of tweaking, right? Okay. So as we begin to see this moment play out, the band is performing, like I said, the Isley Brothers classic, The Shout song. And there's a lady who was actually performing, and it's a black lady. And, she's one of the performers. And the reason why I mentioned race here, guys, because I'm going to tell y'all what I think in a few minutes of why this is important. And I also looked at that because we all know that back in the 1960s, society was not as integrated as it is now. And that was one of the premises that you saw, where this restaurant, even at that time, was a cutting edge, where only the elite and people who wanted to be somebody, the movers and shakers and the wannabe fakers, that they could get into this place called the Star View. And it was, multicultural, diverse, and racially mixed. And I thought that was a beautiful touch, too. to, hone in on that, to show that that was also something that, that they were reaching towards. That was really brilliant. I can't even, I can go on and on about how well written the beginning of this movie is. So anyway, the long and the short of it is, the lady on stage, she's part of the band, right? And so she's, takes a moment and she sees that this girl, the white young lady, she's kind of looking real tripped out and she's bugging out, and she just says, I gotta go to the bathroom. She says that to her boyfriend real fast. And so you're thinking like, okay, wow, she's, probably freaking out because she knows that death is coming. But then you find out that she's pregnant. And it's the black lady who says, how many months are you? And I can tell you, women, we know those things about each other. We just do. At a former job that I used to work at, there was a lady and she had a couple of kids. And we were just walking one morning coming into work, and I just looked at her. And it was just like the Lord just gave it to me. It was just like I just looked at her. She didn't have a baby bump. None of that. None of the what you would consider the typical pregnancy, early pregnancy symptoms, or not, I shouldn't say symptoms, but I guess you could say symptoms. But no outward display of what you would consider. Or, sometimes women begin to get acne, or the face gets a little rounder, or, some people say the face begins to glow, or sometimes, then the bridge of the nose may expand, or the nostril. None of that. No physical. And it was just a spiritual thing. I looked over at this lady and I says, you're pregnant. And she said, no, I'm not. She said, girl, no way. Absolutely not. And sure enough, I'm going to say maybe about a month or so later, maybe several weeks after that, she was like, oh my God, how did you know? And I'm like, what? And she was like, yes, girl, I'm pregnant. She was a white chick, real cool white chick I used to work with. And she's like, oh my God, I'm pregnant. How did you know? Because she didn't even know she was pregnant. Y'all, that's the killing part about it. She didn't even know she was pregnant. So, but I just, the Holy Spirit gives you revelation, and it was just something I can't even describe it. I looked at her, I said, you're pregnant. And she was like, what? So she was. So there's kind of that moment in this movie between the two ladies, and, the backup singer to the band, she looks at this girl and says, hey, how many months along are you? And so first the girl, but she knows she's pregnant. She's like, well, I'm not really sure. And she said, well, maybe like a month or so. And so she's like, have you told him yet? And she was like, nah. And she's like, well, if he loves you, then he won't leave you, And so she kind of gives this girl the encouragement. And as she decides, okay, I'm just going to woman up, level with this guy. I'm pregnant. And the reason why I'm dwelling on that, you all, because that explains succinctly and perfectly why she was acting, very strange and odd, and, had trepidation and like this nervousness. It explains that. And I thought it was just, again, written so beautifully, because people who know this franchise would say, oh, she's acting that way because she's expecting that death is coming. But it wasn't that at all. She was acting that way because she was, having symptoms, and she just didn't know how to really, confront the issue and broach the subject with her boyfriend that, hey, I'm pregnant. And again, this is the 1960s, right? Where that was not something that was just so easily and openly acceptable in society. Dare I say, in 2025, for me, I'm 51. I almost feel more shocked when I see that young people are married before they have children now. It's almost just like you almost have the reverse reaction, where you're more surprised now if a young person is not pregnant and have that child in wedlock versus the person having the children out of wedlock. So that just shows you the paradigm shift just in 60 years in America, and really in the world. There's only a few countries that are still very traditional that way, but A lot of people look at that as a breakdown in morality. I would agree with that. But, and social, mores and things of that sort. But whereas in the 1960s, that was frowned upon and a no-no. You was going to get a finger wagging at you. Now it's almost like, hey, that's just the norm. You almost expect people to like, oh, hey, we're pregnant. Like, huh? Wait a minute. You mean you guys were actually married before you had your baby? So, okay. So it's dealing with that, which also explains why this young lady is nervous, because she's not in 2025. She's in let's say 1965, where you didn't just get pregnant by your boyfriend, by your unwed, paramour, and you two aren't married. And that in of itself would exacerbate or ignite a marriage, or the guy just running away forever. And then your parents would have to cover for you and, conceal a lot of things, these are the things that happen. Okay, so let's fast forward along. So we find out that she's pregnant. She's going to go ahead and confront her boyfriend, which is why, right, all of it makes sense of how she was acting. So as she's going to say, hey, let me tell you something. I'm pregnant. He has something he wants to tell her. Well, guess what? Let me tell you something. I want to marry you. And he actually makes the proposal to her before, she can let the cat out of the bag. Now, hey, I'm expecting. So he says, will you marry me? And she said, you mean us? And he's like, what? And she's like, wait, you're not mad? He said, man, this is the best day of my life. What? So it's a very beautiful, very tender moment. Again, at that point, the band starts striking it up, doing the shout song, and, the people are having a good moment, and they're just dancing and dancing and dancing. And there's this glass floor, right? And they're at the top of this, kind of almost looks like a Space Needle restaurant. And I won't get into all the particulars, but there's this little boy, and he's bad as I don't know what. And he does something that causes an effect, a ripple effect, as well as they say a butterfly effect, as to what happens next things, the next thing after the next thing, that causes the whole floor to just start collapsing. And then now you start seeing where people just start dying and everything, it just happens and it's crazy. And the girl dies. The lady, the guy who proposed, the woman, she dies. And the black lady, let me tell you this, who was the backup singer on the stage, she had a child with her, a little black boy, right? And we find out later that this little black boy is Tony Todd, right? Which this ties back into the very first installment of this franchise, right? To the very first movie where Tony Todd, it's explaining his whole duration throughout the series of this. I mean, it's brilliant. And you realize and you find out, and like, that's the little black kid, so his mom, right, was the one who peeped, this girl's, his mother was pregnant. It's fantastic. So anyway, fast forward on, then all the crazy bells and whistles, the effects is off the chain. It's crazy. The floor gives way. I mean, people are dying in all kind of just weird ways, the piano smashing people. I mean, it's just wild, y'all. It's a free fall. And so many people are dying in this moment. And then you think, okay, well, maybe the girl and the little black kid can hold on. And she sees a little boy. He's like, help me. And, she goes over there. She grabs him. And then you're thinking they're going to survive. And then they don't. And then all of a sudden, you realize that after all of this mayhem happens and take place, then there's this young lady. And she herself wakes up screaming, kind of snaps out of it. And she's dreaming. And she's dreaming about this. And she doesn't understand, why am I dreaming about it? So what you think is happening is not even really happening. Or what you think is a premonition is not even a premonition, which also Final Destination is built on that whole idea of, some people have premonitions. And, I don't want to get deep into the sidebar, but I believe in stuff like that. I do believe in prophetic dreams and things like that. So, anywho, you realize, okay, this wasn't even anything that's real. This wasn't even a premonition. This was just some girl having some type of dream and she's just freaked out in class, right? So you find that out. Her teacher basically excuse me guys for y'all, the teacher basically, kind of gives her a little threat, like she better start stepping up. So anyway, this girl is in college and she keeps having these nightmares, and her roommate is like, girl, I'm like, why do you keep dreaming? She says, I don't know. I just keep dreaming of this thing, blah, 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 blah. And she said, but the lady's name is this, that, and third. And she said, well, why don't you, find out? And what we find out is that the lady that she keeps dreaming about, the blonde, white lady who grabbed Tony Todd's character as a child, what you find out is that's this girl's grandmother. And I believe, guys, forgive me, that she knew it was her grandmother, because she kept saying, I keep having this dream about my grandmother. So it's weird. But then what you later find out is that the grandmother never died. Then it's like the story takes you back in time, right? It's great, because then you realize, like, oh my God, what you thought you was just seeing as a dream, you really was seeing both things happening at the same time. You were seeing a dream and a premonition. So what you were seeing was the grandmother's premonition. She didn't die. She didn't die at all. So this girl goes home, takes a break from school, goes home, begins to talk to her uncle, like, look, I need to know more about grandma, because at this point she thought her grandmother was deceased. And he's like, no, grandmother's not dead. Grandma's just crazy. It made my sister crazy, aka your mom, which is one reason why your mom, kind of lost her mind a little bit. And so this girl and her brother, they're basically coming up in a single parent home with their dad. And I just want to say this. I love the diversity in this. I love how it showed that this young lady, and her brother, that they were biracial. Their dad was Asian and then the mother was white. I liked how it kept showing that, especially in this day and time, to show diversity and to show that. I thought that was also a beautiful touch. And that crossed those racial lines. And again, this is called Bloodlines. So let me hurry along here. So you find out that this lady is not dead. She's thinking that she's dreaming about a dead grandmother. Grandma's not dead. Grandma's just been hiding out. Then we find out that grandma basically has just been like living off the grid for how many years? For almost like 70, like what since the 1970s, 1980s or so. So grandma's been kind of way out, living in a cabin, and sort of like, and if you guys remember the first one with the boy played by actor Devin Sawa, you guys know that he kind of, inoculated himself, right? And insulated himself, in a cabin, right? So you see, that's also kind of giving a little nod, and, the movie is great. So you see that. Grandma is off in Neverland somewhere in this cabin off in the woods. Little girl's like, okay, I just want these dreams to end. I need to get my mind and sanity back. Her auntie by marriage says, look, hey, don't look in this drawer, but if you need information, just don't look in this drawer. So basically, auntie is just kind of letting her in on the low, like that's where you need to go to get the information. So she finds information. She finds her grandma. She goes, talks to her grandma. Grandma's like, look, baby, I've been hiding out. As long as I'm alive, it's going to keep everybody else alive. Why? Because I cheated death. That what you're dreaming, your dream was really my premonition. And grandma kind of breaks it all down. She said, what you were dreaming is my premonition. The Star View did not, crash and burn the way you saw it, because I just had this premonition that it was. And I just started to alert people like, hey, we got to get out of here. We got to get off this dance floor. We got to get out of this building now. And so it shows that she kind of flipped out, and it shows what really happened. And she said, hey, that night I saved lots of lives. She says, but, because I did, she gets into explaining the final destination aspect, but death have circled back to get every last one of those people. And it was so many people. And like, she has this huge, kind of bootleg, mammy made kind of, it's crazy, like map that she puts together. showing all of the people that was there and the families and the bloodlines, and how throughout the years since the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even have the 2000s in there, where people were just dropping like flies, and they were dropping in the order, and then their kids is passing down to the kids. And I'm gonna pause here and say, that Final Destination series definitely has some real deep spiritual understanding, because it even deals with like generational curses, and even how generational curses and they say what is that, generational curses and strongholds. That movie, again, I don't know what kind of spiritual beliefs the writers and the producers may have, but they get deep, y'all. It gets deep. Final Destination Bloodlines, I would say, of all of the movies, this one to me was the one that was done from the most intellectual and, how can I say it, the most intellectual and sophisticated aspect. It was this one wasn't just like, okay, hey, it's a bunch of kids acting wild, everybody's gonna die, everybody's just gonna act crazy. It wasn't like that. This one was very sophisticated, very mature, very, very savvy. The best word I want to say is sophisticated. It was very intellectual, and it was very deep. I mean, even in, we find out further things about how, and grandma, things that grandma is explaining, and throughout the generations and the bloodlines. Man, y'all, this thing was amazing. And so ultimately, this girl doesn't believe her grandma, right? So she's like, Grandma, I think, Uncle was right. I think you're a little wacky. I shouldn't have come here. I just wanted to kind of get my mind right. I figured if I met you, then everything would be good. And Grandma's like, look, girl, you listen, let me tell you something. You need to take this book. You need to take this 411. It's information. I got all this stuff because it's going to show you how things are going to go down next. And, just be careful, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, no, I don't need to see that. She's like, I'm trying to tell you right now. This is what's going to happen, And so Grandma said, okay, you don't believe it. So Grandma said, hey, I'm going to step outside, because Grandma hadn't been outside. She's going to step outside and let you see what happened. And basically, Grandma gets it, right? So little girl kind of freaks out. And from there, y'all, I mean, it's like one after another, like that song by Queen, another one busts the dust. Hey, hey. I mean, it's like another one gone and another one gone, another one bites the dust. It is crazy. So that's what I like about the movie. Very well written from a more mature, sophisticated, intellectual, high-end approach in storytelling. Not just the usual campy, hey, it's a bunch of kids, everybody's wild, everybody's trying to have a good time, and boom, everybody dies. It was not written on that level, okay? And of all the installments, this one, I think, was the one that really, they took their time with it. Okay, these are all the things I liked about it. And the things I didn't like about Final Destination Bloodline, I almost felt that what I love about it, which was the positive of how they really took their time to tell the story, I think that once they kind of got into the meat of it, then they kind of rushed it. And I wonder, and I haven't yet listened to other people's reviews yet, but I wonder if they had came up with that same conclusion. Like it was like they took their beautiful time and laying out, like, boom, just laying out all the cards on the table, laying out like a detective. But then once you get to like, okay, this is what this is, then it was like, okay, boom, we got to put a rush on it. And so again, I don't know if that's because if it was budgetary reasons, and again, Tony Todd recently passed. So again, I don't know, he was only in the movie just a short period of time. But again, I don't know why it felt like it rushed after taking its time so beautifully. But after it took its time so beautifully, then boom, it got on a rush. And I felt like, of course, it couldn't have been a 4-hour movie. That wouldn't happen. But I felt like that either where they was taking their time, either that could have been scaled back and maybe gave more length to what was happening, because once the grandmother dies, then it's like the sister dies, then we find out that, that death supposedly is going out of order, but it's not really going out of order. We find out that, that the uncle wife had an affair, and so the son that everybody thought was the son that was next in line, he wasn't even this guy's son at all, so he had nothing to do with any of that. I mean, it gets real deep, y'all. It's hilarious too, but it's crazy. So this movie deals with a lot of even social, racial aspects of it. There was even one scene where the one brother, because it was like the uncle had like 3 kids, and there was 2 of the kids that come directly from the mother, right? And I hope this doesn't sound confusing, guys, but if you see the movie, you'll say, okay, I understand that. So basically, the one of the cousins to this girl, the heroine, if you will, to the girl, he has a peanut allergy. And so his big brother tells him, like, hey, well, this guy can't have anything with nuts in it because, oh my goodness, his eyes would be tighter. Well, And he says, you understand. And he looks at his cousin, who's, again, biracial, and her father's Asian, right? And so it's almost like you get to see this guy. He's a bit of a jerk. He's a creep, but he even takes kind of like that veiled racial, dig at his cousin. So, I mean, this movie really kind of gets into it. The long and the short of it is, again, they're out here trying to fight death and trying to, reverse the curse, if you will. And ultimately, they arrive at the conclusion of, hey, well, you know what? There was this one particular person who died, and they were brought back. And so that kind of removed the spirit of death. And I started thinking about the power of resurrection through Jesus. Y'all, I mean, this movie is good. But that actually, I believe, came from one of the installments where the woman, she was having the baby, and I think that she died and they had to kind of revive her. So you guys will remember that. And so it was actually Tony Todd's character who tells them that. And then they arrived at the conclusion, okay, the brother who has, or the cousin who has this, peanut allergy, we need for him to die, because it's a fatal kind of allergy. If he dies, and what is that? Anna, what is that? I'm trying to think of that, what the medical term is it for it. But you guys can look it up. When a person really has a horrible allergic reaction, they have to have the EpiPen, I think. It's called the EpiPen. And so he had to carry that around. So his brother tells him, say, listen, the only way that we're going to get this death removed off of our family, you're going to have to die. Now, y'all, come on. Y'all know that'll preach. Come on, y'all. I was even hearing scripture, and I'm like, oh, come on, Jesus. Come on. Y'all, this one was really, really good. I just felt that it rushed where it shouldn't have rushed, or where they could have kept going and taking his time. And I felt like in moments where it took his time, it could have just went on and got on, kind of got on down the road with it. But the long and the short of it, nothing what these people did removed the sting of death, if you will. And here's the final spoiler, and I'm done here, guys. At the very end, the girl, all the cousins get wiped out. So it's just a girl and her brother. And we think she dies, right? And then her brother saves her, from this, from water, kind of, she falls into like this river, like they had like a, what do you call that thing? A van, or what? You guys know what I'm talking about. A camper. So she had a camper. You guys don't know what I'm talking about yet, unless you've seen the movie. She had a camper, and it goes over into like this lake, and the brother goes down there, and you just see the girl. She's just totally lifeless. So next thing you know, she's coughing and everything like that, and he's like, oh my God, you died, but I saved you, And so, okay, so you're thinking that the death has been removed, right? Because she died and the curse was broken. Y'all, come on now, that preach. And you think everything is good. So the brother's now on his way to prom. Although all the cousins is wiped out, the uncle is wiped out, their mom, is wiped out, grandma is wiped out. So it's just the brother and sister left, right? And this is the main character, the girl. And so she's there waiting on her brother to go to prom. He looking really good, really sharp. And all of a sudden, the young lady, he has on his boutonniere, everything like that, getting ready for his prom. And the young lady's father that he was going to take to the prom, he's a doctor. And he says, well, yeah, your sister really didn't die. He said, what you mean she didn't die? He said, no, she just lost consciousness, but no, all you did was just kind of, revive her out of consciousness, but she never flatlined. She never died. She just lost consciousness. So when that happens, it's like, y'all didn't cheat death, because your sister didn't die. And at that point, all the little crazy stuff started happening. Long and the short of it, both the sister and the brother die at the end. Okay. So there are no survivors in this movie. However, I'm going to tell you, Final Destination Bloodlines left a smidgen, a window open for another installment. And I made a prediction, and I'm going to make that prediction right now. Guess what? It's probably going to pick up with a black family, because even though Tony Todd's character, says, hey, I'm dying. I'm getting old. I'm about to die out anyway. Which, unfortunately, that really did happen for Tony. Again, I don't know if he had been sick or things like that. But anywho, the little boy, you have to then start assuming, like, well, did he have a family? So you could tell that story now through the survivors of his family and pick it up where it's Final Destination, 7, right, with, Bloodlines Part 2, and because other than that, I'm not sure how they would then keep the installment going. But you definitely got another way to keep that installment and the franchise going by now telling it through the eyes of Tony Todd's family, Tony Todd's characters, family characters. And I said, man, this is going to probably go now to where, now the story is going to be told through a black family, or through black survivors. So that's what I saw of Final Destination Bloodlines. What would I give this movie? I'm going to give this movie, out of 5 stars, I am going to give it 4.5 stars. Shout out to the late, great Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. I'm going to give this movie a thumbs up. I think it was, of all of the movies, I think it was the one that was the most intellectually smartest, brilliant, savvy, sophisticated, polished. I'll give it all that. The only reason why I won't give it a full 5 stars is because, number one, I was let down that they didn't let any of these people survive. They didn't let anybody survive. The only person that probably survived was the father, who's non-related, and the auntie, who was non-related, right? So again, you maybe could pick the story up from them, but I'm not sure how you would, since the whole premise is that they were not the people who were, quote unquote, under that curse, so to speak. So you could pick it up from that way, but I think if it does come back, they're going to pick it up through Tony Todd's Bloodlines. I felt like, again, it started rushing towards the end. I understand that. Sometimes that happened in filmmaking. If you're on a tight budget or people may be sick or things like that, sometimes you just got to wrap it up. But I felt like that's the only reason why I cannot give this movie 5 stars. But I will definitely give it 4.5 stars. Definitely giving it a thumbs up. Yes, you can see this movie. And if you've never seen any of the other 5 before this one, or 6, I'm sorry, because this one, the 6th or the 7th, I think this may be the 6th film in the franchise. But in either case, whether it's the 6th or the 7th, you don't have to see the previous movies to get this movie. You can totally watch this, and it's a movie unto itself. And like I said, if they take the Tony Todd family approach, this could even rebirth several more installments for the franchise. So that's basically my whole spiel and shtick and review on it. Definitely say go see Final Destination Bloodlines. If you're freaked out by crazy, wild images, don't go see it. If that's something that kind of troubles you, and those graphic images, if that's something that really doesn't sit well with your spirit, and in that regard, don't check it out, because it's crazy. A lot of the stuff that's happening, but like I said, good movie. Go see it. Final Destination Bloodlines.